So, are we supposed to start? Okay. I was told you're the person we're supposed to look at for... Okay. Give us a signal. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for making it out. This room is really comfortable because there's no air conditioning, and I'm not going to catch a cold, thank God. But the name of this particular panel, actually I need to remind myself of it real quick. It's How Not to Be a Drop in the Ocean, and it's kind of perfectly titled given how much rain is going on today. But we have an assembly of some of the biggest and, more importantly, best international independent music distributors in the world. You know, they may look very lo-fi, low-key, down-to-earth guys, but they're ballers.
Is that a short joke?
No. But we're gonna go from Carl over here, who's flying all the way in from Thailand, and then we have Colin over here, who just flew in from a wedding, London vis-a-vis Abu Dhabi, Dubai. Okay, and then last but not least, we have Alex, very much on the end, the UK head representative, the man for Empire in the UK. So without further ado, quick applause. And during the course of our conversation, if any of you have questions that you just want to jump up and throw your hand up, that's totally fine, because rather than wait for the questions at the end, I just want to kind of keep the conversation free-flowing. But to start things off, for each of you, you know, given the fact that independent music globally is #1 in the world in terms of market share combined, and the fact that many of the biggest artists that are out there winning awards and getting nominated and charting also happen to be independent, in many instances, these are artists that you guys are not only working with, but making that success happen. If you had to sort of pick one artist that you guys worked with, and more importantly, the lesson learned that got them to that particular award or that particular chart ranking or particular milestone, who would that be? I'm going to start with you, because in Asia, age first, seniority.
Age first. You know, I think one of the things, I think one of the biggest artists that we've had the pleasure of working with and the good fortune to work with is a DJ called Benny Benassi, who I think many of you might have heard of. When we first encountered Benny Benassi, he was signed to an Italian label called Energy Division, was just starting out on his career. And he had a few singles out, but nothing might seem to be sort of happening for Benny. In about 2003, 2004, we're going back some time now, he had a huge hit with Satisfaction. And we worked with Benny Benassi in this region for a long, long time afterwards. The lesson we learned working with artists such as Benny Benassi is you can help them to get to a certain level, but for independent companies, oftentimes the artists themselves, their success they feel is so much more significant than the support that you can offer to them. They want to then sign to a major. Benny then went on and signed to Ultra Records in New York. Luckily enough, of course, Toco being the kind of company that we are, having a worldwide network of labels and artists and producers that we work with, we're also very good friends with Ultra in New York. Ultra then decided that we'd done such a good job with the development of Benny Benassi in Asia that we could continue to represent his recordings and also do some of his booking business for him. So for us, I mean, the lesson was be careful how successful you are, because you might lose your artist to a major company, but at the same time make sure that you have good relationships with the artists and companies themselves, and perhaps you can continue to work with that artist.
Okay, and Colin, full disclosure, PS, I love what it stands for. Could you tell the audience what it is?
Play it again, Sam.
There we go. Okay, continue.
Hello, my name's Colin. I guess probably a lesson I've learnt is not to give up. An example would be a number of years ago, we signed an artist for the world called Passenger, and we kind of had some expectations around the record that it would do 30 or 40,000 records around the world, and we did that over about a year and a half. And a year and a half later, a Dutch radio plugger came and had a meeting with me and said, have you got any music I can put on radio in Holland? And I'm like, not at the moment. And then I was like, oh, well, hold on a minute. Actually, you know, this album's been out for a year, but have a listen to it. And he had to listen to it on the plane on the way home, gave me a call and said, I think there's a song on this record that's a hit, and I want to take it to radio in Holland. And I'm like, well, okay, the record's been out for a year and a half, and we've all done our best, but by all means, take it to radio. And 6 weeks later, it was number one on iTunes in Holland, and then number one in Holland. 2 weeks later, number one in Belgium. 2 weeks later, number one in Germany. And it went on and did 6 million records around the world.
Wow. So 40,000 to 6 mil. 40,000
to 6 million downloads, singles. And it was just and I guess the lesson for me is that not everybody is right. I mean, here is a record that had a global number one single on it that, quite frankly, I didn't pick. The manager didn't pick. All the licensees that we licensed the record around the world to, nobody said, wow, that song Let It Go is a global number one. But it was a year and a half later, it took a Dutch radio plugger listening to the album on a plane to say, I think that's a number one single. So I think, you know, a lesson for me is not giving up, and a lesson for me is not listening to everyone.
Well, parting with Dutch guys, you can never go wrong anyway. So
that is true.
And then Alex, for you, among sort of all the projects you've worked on, because you've had a very storied past in many different companies.
Indeed, yes.
Pick one.
Mine starts with a confession. I've just joined Empire, so I don't have too many good stories about Empire just yet. However, the good news for you guys is that the guys that started the company are in the room. Can you put your hands up, Ghazi and Nima? There you go. So if you want some Empire stories, accost them later. They may or may not be in the bar with me as well. All right, so my story, it's a good one, I think, because it has an interesting lesson, slightly different to the lessons you just heard there. We worked with an artist called Wolf Alice when I was running a different company, and the campaign was going really well. We'd started long lead time, built it up, singles, EPs, and we were finally ready to get to the album campaign. The album campaign was going really well. We were tracking it all week. We had the right press, the right radio on it. All the socials were saying the right things. The one act, years and years, that were going to potentially beat us to the number one spot, we were tracking them. We knew where they were. We knew what they were doing in terms of their campaign. It was all going really well. And then, just before the release date, there's a festival in the UK called Glastonbury. Anyone heard of Glastonbury? Yeah. So there's a band called the Foo Fighters, and there's an artist called Dave Grohl, and apparently he fell off a stage and broke his leg, which meant that Florence and the Machine then headlined Glastonbury. And because of the headline at Glastonbury, it peaked their numbers, and literally it was fractions, but they just beat us to number one. So Wolf Alice ended up with a number two. But so if there's a lesson to be learnt there is, it's all just luck, isn't it, really? Yeah. So good luck.
Yeah, Alex, you actually accidentally answered my second question, which was one of the most nightmare experiences. So you get the 2-for-1 deal. But I'm going to roll it back to Colin. You know, there may be some artists that you have worked with to the point where they're so difficult, you might have just said halfway through, I'm just going to drop you guys, you're not listening. But or have there been any experiences that you just said, God forbid, if I ever get deja vu again, I'm walking away? Are there any sort of nightmare experiences that you can tell us while all the lights are on?
Absolutely not. No, I think that, you know, for me, the nightmare experience over the last probably, 30 years in my career has been seeing time and time again an artist break. And that artist has broken for a number of reasons, and part of that reason is the team around them, and a formula that a lot of people have been part of. And I've seen time and time again an artist have instant success and no longer listen to the team that's around them. And I think that and you all know what happens pretty quickly. You know how that story ends most times. So yeah, I think for me, I don't want to name names but yeah, I think that's probably the repeatable nightmare that I've seen.
Fair enough. You get the pass. How about you, Tony? Name names. I'm just kidding.
I maybe name a name, but I don't know if any of you are familiar with a nightclub in Seoul called Club Octagon.
Yes.
Well, if you believe DJ Magazine, they have the top nightclub in Asia, I believe, and have been in the top whatever it is, 10 or 20 for quite some time. They're an extremely successful nightclub, and we had the nightmare of booking their act for the opening night and the act not showing up. You can imagine the kind of headaches and problems it caused us and the embarrassment. One of the things it taught me was to never get involved in the live bookings business, because you can't trust these bloody artists to show up, right? But I mean, seriously, from that day onwards, I hang my head in shame, and I removed myself from the DJ booking world for a long, long time. I won't mention any names, but fortunately those artists are no longer that popular anymore either, so I think they got what they deserve. So if you are a budding artist and you want to be a performer, please, whatever you do, make sure you always show up. There's a lot of work gone into preparing a show, and especially when Octagon is the #1 nightclub in Asia and you can't have their opening night act appear on the opening night. Very embarrassing.
I can't even get into that club anymore because they have black lights and my gray hair lights up like a Christmas tree. So I have to call in advance to get in. Now, obviously because you guys are independent, and I think for some artists, there's still that cachet. Oh, I want to sign with a major. But as artists sort of become more deeply involved in the industry, there are definitely some pros and cons to working independently. And I mean, God forbid you get stuck in an elevator with any one of these people in the room. What would the elevator pitch be as to why working with your particular company, or frankly being independent, is better for them than necessarily perhaps working with a major label?
Starting this end again? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so this concept of independence, it's hugely important. I can't impress upon this to you guys enough, really. So, I mean, talking for Empire this time, probably known for being, one of the most successful music companies now in the world, and are completely independent. And what I mean by that is that there is no outside influence. The two guys that I've mentioned that are in the room today, they get up every day and they can choose absolutely what they do with their artists and everything else. They don't have to make decisions that are based around quick money returns and all this kind of stuff. I mean, they're careful, of course, but ultimately it's much more about the music, the artists themselves, and looking at a long-term career. Unfortunately, when you get yourselves into a situation with a company that has let's just say pressures, and those pressures can be everything from just corporate structures and sort of the way things are done, and quick returns on quarterly bonus structures that they want as executives and all that stuff, or it's perhaps VC money that's gone in, it's funding and they want a return on their investment. Just be aware that those types of pressures really impact the decisions that the people that the sort of team that Colin mentioned earlier that you need around you, if they're affected by that, then their decisions are going to be affected by that. And so by finding a good company that is truly independent, and PS is a very good example, as is Empire, of course, that's just be aware of that. That's the sort of stuff they don't tell you when you're signing the contract.
Alex, that's a very long elevator ride, but continue. Colin?
You have a choice, and you're empowered to make your choices, and that's probably the biggest selling point, is the freedom to make the choices you want to make.
Sorry, I was waiting for you to carry on a bit longer there, but hey.
I used up all
That
this
was
time.
yeah. That
You said
was
it was an
that was
elevator
that was a
pitch.
Love Motel elevator ride.
I
so, yeah.
just want to agree with what both these guys say, because obviously, you know, we're all independent, so we all think very much the same way. I just think artists these days, they're just a lot more savvy about the music industry, and they know that they can chart their own destiny. If you go and sign with a major record company, the chance of you doing what you want to do in your own way is limited. If you're creative and you want to have complete control over your creativity and the direction that you take, then stay independent. The independents are here to help. We don't make decisions about what, certainly from Toko's point of view, we don't tell our artists what they can record, what they can release, how they present themselves. In fact, we try to encourage the artist to take the leading role in the creative process. The only part of the creative process, in a sense, or creativity we want to bring to the table is helping them to determine to meet their goals and their ambitions, to come up with creative solutions to help them to get to where they want to get to. As I say, I would thoroughly recommend for any artist in this day and age, you don't need the majors, okay? I've worked for them for years. as an ex-insider, I mean, I think there's so much more that you can do on your own, but also at the same time, as Collins pointed out, you also need a support team around you. You cannot do everything yourself on your own from the outset, so find a team that believe in the artist first and are not just looking for market share.
Yeah, so I mean that team thing, it's come up a few times. If you don't mind me, just ad lib here for a second, just as an anecdotal story. When I was perhaps more your age, it was a moment ago, but I'm probably a product of one of the first, in the UK at least, one of the first generations that was formally educated for the music industry. I did one of the first official degrees for the music industry, and there weren't really any textbooks, but one of the books that they encourage you to acquire and therefore use as part of the course was called Everything You Need to Know About the Music Business by a chap called Donald S. Passman. So there's some noddings of heads and acknowledgement going on. So it's a fairly widely known book. But the first chapter, and it always sticks in my mind as probably one of the best lessons to learn, is it's called Pick Your Team. I mean, it's just so important. Of course, these days there are some great opportunities with the direct upload distribution services, which I think was perhaps where Bernie might go later on with this. But and yes, so that gives you great independence. But the amount of conversations that I have with artists or artist managers, as my role in Empire, is they get themselves to a certain point, and then they know that they need help, and so they've still got to pick their team. So just be aware that. I don't know where you guys are all at with your careers, but that moment will come, I think. So pick your team is a really, really important thing.
Just out of curiosity, how many people out there are actually artists, not the camera guy? Your hand raised was to fix the lens.
Right.
Okay.
We've got a few.
And one of the things that I hear time and time again when artists want to get booked is big data. That's the big deal. They want to know what the social numbers are, how many followers, likes, views you've got. And then for whatever reason, that seems to be a determining factor on whether or not to book or believe or sign an artist. But by virtue of being independent, a lot of the decisions are not necessarily made on analytics, but just a gut feeling. So if you guys were to encounter an artist that you think has it, but the numbers aren't there on social media yet, what would you advise to them to either get those numbers up, or is it something you would just say, you know what, fuck the numbers, your music's amazing? What would you guys do given that sort of situation and kind of given the obsession with social media, with big data, and with analytics?
I can give a very short answer because I realise my answers are normally very long. But one of the, just for Empire, one of the things that I was most impressed about, and I've worked in the music industry all my life, is that the meetings that the company have, one of them is called the A&R meeting, they actually listen to music. And I've been in lots of meetings in the music business, and it's amazing how few of them actually included the music piece of it. So, I mean, certainly as far as Empire goes, that's one of the most important pieces of all of this. So, the music.
I think I said this on a panel last year, but geography does not matter as much as community does. So, do I look at the numbers, and will I look at the numbers? Yes, because, but what you're looking at, you're not looking at total numbers, you're looking at movement of numbers, because if someone's got 10 Facebook fans and they double that in a week, then that's great. But it also shows that now to be an independent artist, yes, you do have a choice and you have a lot of freedom, but you also have a lot of hard work to do. And to do that work, you need to be involved and you need to be part of making sure that you're building a community or reaching a community and your fan base. And you need to be very proactive in doing that or having someone help you do that. So, no, I think the numbers are important. And unfortunately, yes, a lot of festival bookers and radio stations and other parts of the business are taking it to the extreme when it comes to looking at those numbers, and I think that's really sad. But what you can see is you look at Idols, kind of punk band that debuted top 5 in the UK this week, and just watching how they built their community, and their community is not geographically bound. They have this worldwide, community of young kids that are kind of into the next wave of punk that's coming. So so are the numbers important? Yes and no. But what is important is that you understand how to reach communities and you're proactive in doing that.
Tokyo, we're a small independent company. We have a stable of about half a dozen priority artists that we work with, and most of them are sort of in what I call like the embryonic kind of stage. We're developing them, we've found them, we've done our A&R, we think they're great. Their social media numbers, most of them are non-existent. So what we've tried to do is to marry them alongside some of our artists that have a lot greater social media reach. And we encourage everyone to join in and post and repost everyone else's Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter posts. So that instead of just relying on an individual artist to grow its own fan base, we use our stable of artists to grow their fan bases across social media. Is social media and the metrics important? Yes, sadly, whatever way we want to look at it, it is very, very important. You're not going to get bookings for live concerts unless you've got great, Facebook fans in certain territories, and there are apps online which mine all this data from all the different sites across the world. I've seen DJ apps which tell you which DJ to book where and for how much and all this kind of stuff. So the data is there, people use it. So you have to be aware that you have to be in it to win it. You have to do a lot of hard work, as Colin points out, but at the same time, there are ways that you can build your community, as we do by our artists helping each other to build their fan bases. But it is still very, very important. You can't ignore it. That's really the final thing. You've got to be in it to win it. You've got to work hard. You've got to be social media savvy as well. I think that's also important. People can post all sorts of different things on social media as artists which don't work. I've even been asked to write a PDF or a guidebook on how to operate artists' social media accounts. I'm sorry, I don't have time, I'm doing other things, but surely you can figure it out for yourselves. It's not difficult. It's social media. Just be sociable. But artists, but they'll publish. Oh, I was having a great party the other night in Paris, and there they are with having a sort of few glasses of wine with a few friends. Well, what's that got to do with your music career? Why is a fan going to be interested in you partying in Paris last night? They'd be interested if you went to see perhaps Daft Punk in Paris last night, right? And you were backstage talking to the artist, but at a cocktail party in a cocktail dress? No, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. So as I say, you've got to be in it to win it. You've got to work hard at it, but be careful what message you're spreading as well. You want to attract fans rather than put people off.
Well, if they were drinking with the Daft Punk guys without the helmet, then it's compelling. But for a lot of the artists out here, they'd be very curious as to what it would take to essentially work with or perhaps even be signed to your respective companies. How do you guys do the A&R, the discovery process? Is it something through passive submissions where you have people just sending you stuff, or is it active scouting where you're out looking, or is it a mix of both, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, Empire absolutely active, very large A&R team across America and other parts of the world. It's a huge part of what Empire does. But one other thing that is important that perhaps if you don't know, you should know, it's about who you know as well. A lot of artists find our way through people that we've perhaps done business with before, and actually, amazingly, a lot of those are lawyers. Yeah, I know, right? They're just a great source of kind of connections with either managers or artists themselves, and so who you know. But I mean, Empire is hugely active on this, purposefully so.
Oh, I think not much has really changed in. We've always just. It's a combination of everything. I mean, you have your own scouting teams that are out there looking. You have your trusted networks of, recommenders that are, forwarding things to you. And you have people submitting direct. And it's just a balance of everything. I think it's just... The more noise that someone makes, the more you get noticed. And I think one of the best things that I do love is Empire, and I think there's a lot of services out there where you can just pay money and get your music put up, and it's just all noise. There's just so much, and I think what makes a difference is when you can find a platform that's curated. That allows access, but it's also curated, and I think so. Hats off to you for that.
Hats off to Ghazi and Nima again, sitting at the back there, paying attention. I'm sure.
I'm sure you'll be here next year as well, Alex. It's great. But at Toca, I mean, we're the same as I'm sure the other two guys here. I mean, we are in some ways we do our A&R both actively and passively, though I must say. I mean, it's quite kind of strange in a way to say this, but I listen to virtually every single piece of content that arrives on my desk that's from a new source. So if it's someone I've never heard of before, don't know where they came from, don't know who they are, don't know what it is, I will 99 times of 100, I'm going to listen to what I'm being offered, what I'm being presented.
What's your address?
I'll hand out business cards later, anyone's interested. But, we also get sent a lot of content from reliable sources who we know already what the kind of content level is going to be. Some of the sources we work with, some of the sources we don't work with. But you're always listening, maybe 1 in every 10 tracks, to the sources that you don't work with on a general basis, because you want to know what they're presenting now, how they're developing, what their sound's evolving into. We like to sort of keep up with the times, and I think the best way to keep up with the times is, obviously to try and be ahead of the industry as it changes. So I use A&R also as a way of feeling out where the music industry is going and where we need to be as a company in the future. So as I say, both active and passive. If and there's not just myself that does A&R at Toca. There's a team of 4 of us. So there's 4 kind of entry points into our company. So I don't necessarily have to listen to every single piece of content that arrives at Toca. I've got guys in Holland, in Scandinavia, and Australia that do the same job as well, which is very, very helpful. But as I say, as new artists, fresh artists or whatever, don't be, worried or concerned about sending what you do to, A&R people, because as I say, 9 times out of 10 we go, oh, same old stuff, oh, what's this, something new, And for me, that is always sort of quite exciting to figure out what's new and what's going on. Obviously, the chances of us receiving something fresh, which is going to be something that we sign, is obviously quite narrow at the end of the day, because there's still some, filtering sort of process that goes on. But I would just encourage anyone who's an artist to keep sending music to whoever they can. Hopefully people will have the time to listen, and people will pay attention to what you do. We picked up an Indian pop trap act through very much a process like this, which we're very happy with. And I'm sure, as I say, I see there's lots of raw talent out there in the market. So just carry on, sending your tracks in.
So following up and sort of following through on what you just mentioned, Carl, is for a lot of artists out here who just by default happen to be from Asia, and you guys having a track record of having regional acts from primarily North America and from Europe going global, What kind of advice can you give to those out there who happen to be Asian artists who are trying to possibly maybe look for success not only across Asia, but more importantly, beyond Asia to the bigger markets, be it in Europe or be it North America? What are sort of the one or two things that you think could be done, not necessarily better, but at least out there as sort of priority things to work on? And more importantly, what you think might be that that 1 degree of separation that could possibly maybe, get them across the finish line?
Yeah, so for most of my career, I've worked with American companies, and I've always been kind of the international, if you like, piece of that. One of the things that I've always struggled with certain artists is this understanding that just because they perhaps are successful in the home country doesn't necessarily mean that anyone else knows who the hell you are. And so the best way of solving that is to get on a plane and go and visit that country and spend some time doing some interviews and build a team, right? So some of this other advice that you've had, but get into market. And also, it's a big world out there. Yes, social media is brilliant at helping spread a message globally, of course. But there are always often markets that your music perhaps leans closer to. Perhaps it's a language thing. Perhaps it's a culture thing. Perhaps you're just hugely interested in it. Perhaps you've taken a lot of leanings on your musical sound from a particular, another country. But so you can be selective as well. You can focus in on what you want to do and where you want to go, and understand, that that's a market that I could potentially do well in. But yeah, get on a plane, get there, and find that international team as well.
I don't think there's been a better time in history where you've got, eyes are on Asia right now. With social media, with streaming, with YouTube, the diversity in music globally is only going to get stronger and stronger. So I think being, whether you're from South America or Asia or Africa or Canada, there's more opportunities now more than ever to get noticed. And I stand by that talent will prevail, and that if you really are a great artist and you're doing something unique and it's something that is going to be popular, in today's age of social media, you will be found.
I don't know if anyone here is a fan of 88 Rising, the Asian record label. Well, I am a great admirer of what they do, and I think they're bringing Asian artists to the world in an unprecedented way. One of the things that excited me the most when I first discovered 88 Rising was not just Rich Brian, but the Higher Brothers, who are rappers from China. And I was sitting there watching one of their videos, and it was amazing because some of the rapping is in English and some is in Mandarin, but every time they rap in Mandarin, they've got English subtitles along at the bottom, and I go, oh, wow, I fucking understand their message. You really get what they're trying to do, Yeah. And so my advice is, make sure that your message is universal. And if that means, singing in one language and putting English subtitles on, or singing in English and putting Chinese subtitles on to reach a Chinese market, whatever it is, just make sure that your message is universal and can be appreciated across the world. That's the first thing, I think, God, on top of that,
was it the fanny pack that got you too?
Oh, I watched the videos about the fanny pack afterwards, and all these guys commented, I can't believe he's doing that, he's wearing the fanny pack, oh my God, But what 88 Rising do, obviously, is they've torn up the hip-hop rule books and sort of rewritten them for a new global audience, I would say, We don't need, hip-hop doesn't belong to America, it doesn't belong to any country or nationality, anyone can steal the basic concepts of hip-hop or rap and make their own music. And that really was going to be my second point, is if you really do want to succeed internationally, there's no reason why you can't appropriate certain elements of international music and make them your own, in your own way. Everyone receives information in this world and filters it and and throws it back out again in their own unique way. So I would just say to people, don't be scared to copy, but make sure your message is universal and everyone can understand it, and that will help you to get to the point where you can travel to other countries and present yourself to overseas markets, and people will understand you and will appreciate you.
Okay, great. She put the sign up, so this is a great time to start fielding questions out in the field. So does anyone have any questions for any of these distinguished panelists? The camera guy doesn't count. You keep raising your hand every time I ask. So anybody with at least one question? Someone keeps touching their hair. That's not a question. Anybody? Actually, I have one really basic question. Is, as you mentioned before, a lot of artists who are using different digital distribution solutions, what's often sort of a tug of war is the basic timeline on a release schedule in terms of when the album is mastered, when the album art is finished, how much time do you, recommended time, would you tell artists that they need before they actually release it? Because I go batshit crazy when artists tell me, I'm going to release my single on Monday. When is it finished? No, still mixing it. When's the artwork going to be at lunchtime? I mean, it's great that they can rush it out because they promise their fans on Instagram, but the reality is that's not a realistic release schedule. So for independent artists out there, what would you recommend as sort of an ideal kind of roadmap to put out a release that has a fair chance of not only getting proper promotions, but more importantly, a likelihood of possibly maybe even charting?
Yeah, I'm going to ruin your question slightly by saying that there's not really one good answer to that. So, yeah, I know. Annoying, isn't it?
But the same day doesn't work, so yeah, I can tell you that from experience.
Look, I think you've got to be aware of lots of different factors. I mean, ultimately, these days, realistically, yes, you can have a record up on iTunes and Deezer in 24 hours. Spotify, it'll take about 48 hours. So you can have immediacy around something. Now, that could be because an event of some description has occurred. Perhaps a record has just, been synced to a TV advert or something like that, where you get visibility around it, and therefore having it online, therefore Shazamable, should we say, works, right? And then you can build a buzz off that. Having said that, companies like Apple, in particular, they have a particular lead time in terms of making a pitch for on-site marketing. That's, I think, 3 weeks. Others are shorter, and there are other benefits to getting your music set up for a much longer lead time than the immediate approach that I mentioned before. So I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Quite honestly, it depends on perhaps the type of artist that you are and where you are in your career, and indeed the actual individual record that you're talking about. So yeah, there you go. That's no answer at all, is it?
That's a good one. It's about a 3-week window, but it could be 3 hours if you've got a commercial ready to go.
But yeah, to set the record up, though, I mean, to do a campaign. I mean, some of the most successful campaigns I've been involved in have been at least 6 months.
Okay.
Right, because we're talking about not just putting a record out, and I think we have to get past that. We're talking about an artist, an individual. We're talking about a person, right? And so there's much more to them than just the record. We're talking about their personality, but talking about the other things that they're into and they like, and how they engage with community, and ultimately, the most important thing is who their audience is and where their audience is actually at, right? And how that audience is how the artist is part of that audience's life. It's all hugely important. It's not just about a record.
Colin?
Well, we don't really put out records anymore. We market artists. And it's not whether or not you've got an album coming or whatever. It's more about knowing when the fan base that you're building is ready for new content. And that doesn't necessarily have to be an album. It doesn't necessarily have to be a single that has to be on streaming services. In some cases, it might be better to start out on SoundCloud and to start out, building a base. So, when you do hit the streaming services, you're triggering algorithms, and you're kind of launching into the stratosphere rather than just dropping off the cliff. But it's also about just knowing and having a good sense of when your community that you're building is ready for more content from you. And that could be an album, it could be a single, it could be 6 videos in a week, it could be a photo of Instagram at a party in Paris. It's just about knowing and having a good sense of feeding, because you're building your brand as an artist. The end game anymore isn't really just drop an album and sell records.
Tony, real quick. Carl, real quick.
Again, I think we've all basically our agreement is very much on the same thing. I mean, technically, from a distribution point of view, from our side, 12 to 8 weeks, 4 weeks minimum, right? Seriously, before, and we release singles, we don't release albums generally. We do release albums, but most of our business is through singles. So we need a lot of lead time to get set up. We have a global team that works with us. We want everyone to release on the same release date across the world to hit the Spotify algorithms and, reach whatever maximum kind of potential we can. That first week of release in some respects has become very, very important in the streaming world. But at the same time as we release singles, what we do, obviously, we're in the dance field mainly, so each single will probably have 2 or 3 remixes to go with it. So we'll release the single first just as one track, just as one single, to try and drive all of the traffic to that one particular upload. We'll upload one YouTube video on one platform, try and drive the traffic to that video, and then maybe 2 or 3 weeks later we'll drop a remix, and then 2 or 3 weeks later after that we might drop another remix, and if we've got a few in the bag we'll wait a few more weeks and drop another remix. And at the end of that period, what we'll do is we'll put all of the tracks onto one product and release it as a digital album. So this works well on the streaming platforms because you get digital singles and digital albums, and so we cover all bases. We've sort of given up on the album in terms of as a product, we put a collection of recordings together and sell them en masse. We work with singles, but obviously, as I say, we cheat a little bit. We try to help our artists by releasing singles and albums. So our campaign for us is, as I say, 12 to 8 weeks if we can, 4 weeks minimum, and maybe your campaign on your single will run for 6 to 12 weeks afterwards.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. If any of you have any more questions, Pool Party, hit these guys up. They're easy to drink with. So thank you so much.
And thanks for coming. Thanks for your time.